Sennheiser's been taking huge swings at the wireless headphone world. This is the new Momentum 5, and while it's really good in some ways, it may not be the best one for you. Let's talk about that. Of course, now I can't talk about the Momentum 5 or really any Bluetooth headphone without talking about this. This is the HDB 630. It was my headphone of the year for 2025, and it is still an absolute unit. If you want to watch the video on this, I'll have a link in the video description. But basically, if you care about sound quality, this thing's insane. It has full parametric EQ, starting with a pretty neutral profile overall, but you can transform it into pretty much whatever sound you want. Other headphones like the Momentum 4, the AirPods Max, the Sony WH-1000 XM6, they're not even a part of this fight anymore. Like, the only thing those really had a leg up on these with was noise canceling. It seems like now that's not the case. Speaking of cases, I'm going to talk about the cases. Then we'll talk about the headphones. The HDB 630 has a way thicker case, though it also feels a little bit beefier. There's more room in here. Momentum 5 case feels more refined, but not quite as nice. You can fit it in a backpack a lot easier. Now that said, the headphones aren't the same size either. The HDB 630 is notably thicker. And something else you'll notice here, they have different microphones too. That's going to be an important note. We'll circle back to it later. For now, let's roll up our sleeves, talk about the build. These are honestly pretty comfortable. On the outside of the pad here, we're sitting at about 42 millimeters, but on the inside, you'll notice they go a lot deeper. Now, this is like many other headphones. The inside of the pad sits closer to around 54 millimeters in width, about 70 millimeters in height. And when you put these on your ear actually kind of sits behind this lip. I guess that tells you the pads are swappable, but what it hasn't told you is the Momentum 5 has a user-serviceable battery.
Yes!
What? Ah! Now, dimensionally, this isn't that different from the HDB 630, and you'll notice they actually have the same wear sensors in the cup right here, too. The adjustment mechanisms are basically the same between the two, just a smooth sliding, and we get some slight differences here, like a synthetic leather on the 630 versus this fabric on the Momentum 5. You'll also notice that the Sennheiser logo is a little bit different between the two. Well, they switched it up. It used to be like this on the Momentum 4, same as on the HDB 630. Comfort-wise, I found these to be pretty decent. I actually just took these to Singapore. I went to CanJam Singapore out there. We actually did a collab vid with Critical, so make sure you stick around and subscribe. You're not going to want to miss that. But what that means is that I wore these for a 16.5-hour flight there and a 14.5-hour flight back. Like, the whole time. I maybe took them off for a few minutes to eat, and that is it. These are a pretty comfortable headphone. I am very happy with how Sennheiser did the ergonomics, and I think it's also worth noting that alongside that, the battery life was really good. I actually did not have to charge them. It was getting a bit close by the end of that trip, but they made it through. The other big point, and this is really important for flying like that, the ANC on the Momentum 5 is a lot better. Honestly, I feel like it is on par with things like the WH-1000 XM6 or the AirPods Max, which is crazy to say out loud because, I mean, I liked some things about the Momentum 4. It's no secret that I love the HDB 630, and it has good noise canceling. It's better than it ever was on like the Bose QC45. But the Momentum 5 is just better when it comes to noise canceling and transparency. This is where things start to get blurry. And I think where we should start talking about sound quality, right after we talk about our sponsor. And you know, I can see why people are going wireless these days. Wires can be pretty inconvenient. Your setup kinda sucks. What? I don't know what else to say. Your shit is a mess. This is the Secretlab Magnus Pro. I've bought plenty of desks in the past, and honestly, when I accepted this one as a sponsor spot, I had no idea it was going to be this nice. It got here, I tried to move the box inside and thought, what is this made of? Like, I've got standing desks, those are heavy. This is also a standing desk, it's just a standing desk that's made of metal. But it's got some other cool things that I really like. There's a power pass-through in the leg of the table, so you can just plug up all your stuff and leave them in this massive cable tray in the back. I mean, honestly, the nice thing is it looks good whether or not I'm careful with my cable management. Because this is a giant metal table, it It has a magnetic ecosystem. There's a headphone hanger that I have for it, but you can get all kinds of other interesting accessories. The desk pad itself that goes on top has these magnetic clasps. And you can just do magnet stuff with it. And for the first time, and I have no idea how long, my setup actually feels really good. If, like me, your setup is calling out your cable management, or it's just time for something as nice as your headphone or speaker setup, you should check out the link in the video description with the Magnus Pro and its magnetic accessories. Let's get back to the review. Now that that's taken care of, let's talk sound. So here's the measurements for the Momentum 5. A few things to note. One, the way we take these measurements. This is taken by measuring the headphones on several different measurement fixtures. We then use that data to build a map of how these headphones might vary from person to person. Then there's this gray area. This is the range the average person will find to be higher sound quality. And you'll notice, look at that, that is a pretty wide range in terms of sound, all things considered. Here we have the sub-bass. Here we have bass going into the low mid-range where you hear a lot of kick and punch and warmth. Here is the mids. That's where most of your music lives. The mid-range into the treble right in this range, and then the treble into the upper treble up here. It's where a lot of your sizzle, the sounds come from. Now, truth be told, most people can't even hear this high. Most people's hearing cuts off more like right here. So Momentum 5, you'll notice a few things right off the bat. One, this sub-bass right here is pretty strong. It's more than I personally like. Now, you can pull this down in their app. They give you a band for 40 hertz, which pulls this down, and then you can sit right in about here. That I find to be much more preferable to the stock bass tuning. The mid-range, especially going into the low mids and the bass, is pretty warm-leaning, though not absolutely insane. It stays within the bounds. Around here, 900 hertz, we get a bit of a dip in that can go under the bounds. And depending on your head, you may either have a bump right here, or it may be flat right here through the upper mid-range and lower treble. Most people will likely experience a dip right here around 2.5 kilohertz. And through most of the treble after that, it actually stays pretty linear, pretty sweet. We get a bit of a bump right here. This does go outside the bounds at about 9.5 kilohertz, and then from there things start to trend downwards. Now, the odds of you hearing where this falls off a cliff all the way up here are extremely low unless you're like, I don't know, 19 and have perfect hearing. Even then, you probably won't notice. But the most problematic areas of this entire range that I want to note are probably where this dips right here and where this is going to bump for some people in this 2.5K range. Behind that, definitely this bump at 9.5K here, though I definitely notice that less than I do this dip right here. Now, the dip isn't super crazy. It is relatively deep, but it's not super wide. So if the dip was a bit more like this, I think it would be notably worse, but this is still worth taking a note of. If you are one of the people that ends up more on the bottom of this range right here and right here, what you end up with is, you know, a pretty linear response overall, especially if you bring that bass down. I mean, that's not bad looking. But something you have to take into account is unit variation. I talked to Resolve over at the headphone show, and he was kind enough to share his measurements. This is my 5128 measurements and his 5128 measurements side by side. Now, this is going to be showing the ones that are on the upper end of this bump instead of the lower end, because that was on a 711 fixture, though I did also do measurements in a real human ear, which was included in the previous set we just saw. You'll notice that his does have a bit more treble. They're pretty close. Like, this is within the range I would expect of unit variation, but his does trend a little bit higher in the treble versus my unit, which trends a little bit lower. Now, that said, his does have a bit less of a dip right here, also at about 2.5 kilohertz. So it seems like this whole range is where you're going to experience a little bit more variation from unit to unit. Again, this isn't bad unit variation. This is kind of what I would expect, but I think this is an important note. I do want to thank the guys at the Headphone Show for sharing this data so we can get a better picture of how this headphone performs. Speaking of performance, there is something else very significant that needs to be noted here. You'll notice I didn't put in the frequency response of the HDB 630, and that's because the HDB 630 is a transformer. It's a shapeshifter. And by that, I mean it has parametric EQ. You can turn this headphone into whatever you want it to be. Sure, it starts out pretty neutral out of the box, but that's not why I was interested in it. I was interested in it because it starts out neutral and then you can EQ it to whatever you want. The Momentum 5 does not have that parametric EQ. You are limited to the bands that Sennheiser gives you. And while this is the only thing I actually ended up doing to it, I really would have liked to have had more bands. For example, that peak is around 9.5 kilohertz, and we don't have a band for that. Well, that dip is at 2.5 kilohertz, and we don't have a band for that either. The areas that I would be most interested in changing, I don't have controls for. Versus the HDB 630, well, I have controls for everything. I can make this headphone sound like almost anything off the wall from my headphone collection. And you get to see my messy hair again. So this is what the mic sounds like on the Sennheiser Momentum 5. I mean, it's clearly still a headset mic, but honestly, it's not bad. It's better than some of the others that we've heard. Now, let's compare this to how the HDB 630 sounds. It's obviously a beamforming microphone. And, I mean, maybe the difference isn't huge to you, I don't know. I feel like it's notable. Between the stock tuning being honestly decent, though with a few flaws, the microphones being better, and the Momentum 5 having better noise canceling, it really comes down to what your priorities are. So really, what matters more to you? I wish I could combine both of these headphones into one, because then it would be just about perfect. There are some things I would still improve. Like, for example, when you're using either of these with a computer over USB-C and the microphone is active, the actual sound quality of the headset still degrades a little bit. This is just a problem that lots of Bluetooth headphones have. But that's if I'm really nitpicking. And that's also not something specific to these headphones. So, what's it going to be? Do you care more about having that ultimate sound quality, having PEQ, and really being able to turn your headphones into whatever you want with pretty good noise canceling, pretty good transparency mode, and acceptable microphones, or having a headphone that's already pretty close to great tuning out of the box, with a few gripes here and there, notably better microphone quality, a user-serviceable battery, and stellar active noise canceling? All I know is that if Sennheiser keeps going down this path, they're going to be dominating the ANC headphone market before long, and I really don't see a reason to be buying any ANC headphone right now that isn't one of these two.
Ooh, but my ecosystem.
Yeah, if you want to wear a headphone that weighs, let's see, 388 grams and has sound quality that would have been acceptable for the late 90s, sure. That reminds me, I gotta weigh these real quick. Momentum 5, 291.8 grams versus the HDB 630 at 311.44 grams. Okay, that's gonna wrap it up. Remember, good sound is getting cheap, cheap sound is getting good, price does not correlate with sound quality, and vote with your wallet. Peace.